and that's where relationships are really tested. But when you build good ones, that's where you can get great strength out of the whole group. The guy who is pushing the starter is as important as the guy that gets to be in the starting lineup in City Park on a Saturday.
Welcome to a new edition of the City Voice podcast, and I'm joined by a very special guest, John Hackworth. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Pete.
It's been a while since we've done this.
Yeah, a couple of years probably.
Yeah, this building didn't exist. I don't even think the training facility existed.
None of this
the stadium
existed.
certainly didn't.
Stadium was in construction, but wasn't built at all. So it's nice to still be here after all that time.
Yeah, and you have had quite a few years. However, what's the experience been like for you? You know, obviously you've been around and worked in lots of different places. How has this been for you as careers go?
It's been great. It hasn't been without its trials and tribulations, but the fact that I can say this very honestly, I'm really proud of what I helped do here, and over the course of 3+ years, starting a MLS club from scratch, essentially. And now you look around and having what we have and doing it in a city which is fantastic for football in general. Having my own family move here, 2 of my 3 boys live here now. St. Louis has become home. So that's really rewarding when you can stay in a job and feel good about it, and you can have your family call the city you're living in home. That's pretty nice.
And I know that you do have some gripes about the city, in particular when you're riding your bike in the morning. We've shared these conversations. We've both become quite Midwestern, big wavers.
Yeah.
So tell us about this gripe.
All right, so I have a little bit of a gripe with some of the way that people drive in St. Louis, and I think that's a pretty fair criticism. But on a bike in particular, I need to be really careful about how I roll through stop signs, because you never know what's coming. And on top of that, if I'm riding on skinny tires, then I got to watch out for all the potholes, because there is a lot of roads here that are not smooth surfaces. So that's just 2,
What about the waving?
Oh, the waving is different. The waving is, I'm a true, original Southern boy who has grown up believing that you should say hi to everybody that you pass. And while I wave, I'm not getting that same love back. So I've tried to have multiple test cases where I see how many people wave to me. And although Midwesterners are fantastic people, they don't seem as comfortable waving to the random stranger that's riding by on a bike.
Londoners get very offended if you wave at them. New Yorkers, even worse. But since being here, I'm a big waver, and I get the same thing. I'm like walking around the neighborhood, I'm waving, I'm not getting the wave back.
Yeah.
I'm leaning in. Should I be embarrassed or should I carry it on? Has it gone out of fashion to wave in St. Louis? Who knows? But we'll move on to more serious topics now, John. We've got some fan questions for you.
Good.
People were very keen, so we might not get to all of them, but this will be the nice warm-up section. Lou Boys SC. What are the keys to success in building the championship teams with Louisville City FC?
I think people and culture. Part of it's who you select, and then it's how you build a culture and an environment that allows for the success to take place.
Kristen Carver, she shouldn't be asking a question, but a lot of people ask this question. What's your favorite cycling route in St. Louis?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say I'm pretty happy making up a loop around Forest Park. I love to go through Tower Grove, into Forest Park, and then make up a little loop. And I find myself doing the same loop, but it's rather fun right now in Forest Park. It's such a great park. Especially when I kind of start and end in Tower Grove, but I mix in the middle section of Forest Park. That's my favorite.
Is this a nice time of year to ride when it starts to cool off a little bit? Or do you like in the searing sun?
Well, it's not about as much, I like daylight. And so because I'm up early and in the facility and working pretty early, my time to ride is generally in the evening. So I love this time of year, but with diminishing daylight, it takes away from how much I can ride my bike.
Seek out wisdom, Joseph. Being a head coach is 24/7, never take a day off. How do you handle the stress?
I don't find it that I don't look at the stress part of it. I look at the responsibility part of it. And the 24/7 part is just all I've ever known, and I love it. So I'm a little bit of a sick individual. I like the pressure. I like the stress. I like the challenge. It's what I've known, and it's just, I think you need to have that, not looking at it as stress, but looking at it as problem solving. Like, what can I do to problem solve it? How can I make it better? And when I am in tune with how I want to work and how my staff wants to work and how the players are working, I don't think of it as a stress. Of course, the games become stressful, or a loss in particular can make you feel like, oh, you don't know what you're doing, but that's not reality. You trust in what you do, you have a really good process of how you work, and then you lean into that, and therefore you focus more on the problem solving part than you do on any stress or pressure you feel.
Love that answer. Go 10. How thankful are you for the quality and development of the players joining the academies?
Really thankful, and I think some of our clubs in the area do a fantastic job of doing the groundwork, and then when we get those players, they come to us at a really high level, and then hopefully we can give them something that those clubs can't. In general, St. Louis is one of the best, it's not a market, it's a place where soccer is part of the culture, and it has been for generations. So like, we can claim it the soccer capital USA, but it has always been the place where soccer was played, and grandfathers and fathers and sons and now moms and daughters are enjoying the game. That makes it pretty unique in this country.
Somebody's asked, Briar Guy 3030, what's your favorite activity to do outside soccer that's not cycling?
Hanging with my wife. She's pretty cool. So we enjoy, being together, whether that's taking a walk with our dog or just, but I also love the fact that I have two of my sons here, and we spend a lot of, if I'm not focused on St. Louis City, I'm definitely focused on my family or cycling. Out of those three things, I don't know much about what's going on in the world.
Hannah asked, when did you start the run club before a match?
I think from day one, we just said, hey, there's a good way for us as a staff to, do something outside of the stressors and the normal, day-to-day operations. And when we're on the road, why not take advantage of being together, share some laughs and get some fitness.
I know that when my team join that, they always come back complaining that it's too hard.
Except for Kristen. Kristen hangs pretty good.
Yeah, she does. Where do you see
Neil? Not so much, by the way.
Neil sitting in the back there.
I think
looking
Neil
very
showed
sheepish.
up for one of them and then never showed up again.
Oh, my blisters!
So,
my blisters.
He did show up on the hottest run that we've ever gone on, though. I will say that it was brutal.
Where do you see the club in 10 years?
I think it becomes one of the top and premier clubs in this country, and I think it's supported by the fact that we have a soccer culture in this city and community that is unmatched. Now we need to build all of the pieces where we've already had a lot of success, but I think that's the biggest challenge to us is, can we start to acquire trophies? Can we start to develop the homegrown players? But this is already a special place, and we need to lean into that and then build upon it. So I think there's a lot to do in the next 10 years, but I'm very positive that we're going to get there, and that we have everything at our disposal to do it.
Great. Two more questions from the fan section. St. Louis City Boys, you have experience across various levels in the US soccer pyramid. What's it been like in working with Lutz to explore talent on different levels?
Lutz, this could be a whole podcast. It means that Lutz is a driven individual, and he never kind of rests on what we've just accomplished. which is nice in a lot of ways, but it also is what it is. So we look under, every stone, we shake every bush, and we try to find players and staff that fit well with what our principles are, and that is a lot of work sometimes, but it's the good work. It's the kind of work you want to do.
And then final question, Paddlemax V is basically asking, why does the team not attack the supporters section in the second half?
That's a good question, and that literally comes down to the referee's flip of the coin. So I think that would be Roman's preference, but he doesn't get that choice sometimes.
There we go. Solved. Okay, let's move on to the meat of the podcast. It's been a pretty crazy year so far. Like, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing what I love. I'm in a position that not many people are fortunate to be in. I have a tremendous group of individuals that I'm working with, a fantastic staff. I mean, I play in the best soccer cathedral in the country, in the best soccer city in the country, and there's a lot of passion and energy around that, and we're making a lot of positive steps in the right direction, and we're building something that I think will be really good for the future.
You've said to me before, when I've asked what you're up to, you're like, I go where Lutz tells me to go and I do the job. Your flexibility to move into different roles is obviously a key attribute, and you've got a lot of experience. How has this adaptation into interim coach been for you, and was it unexpected?
It was definitely unexpected, unplanned, but that's part of what we're in. We're in professional football at the highest level in this country, and so you can't predict sometimes what's going to happen. I would say that, I have done a lot of things in my, 3 years here, and specifically working with Lutz, you kind of have to. So I think the real special part of that is that Lutz and I have a good relationship, and we understand each other's strengths and each other's weaknesses, and then we work well to build off of those things.
The job title that you had before was technical director. Could you explain what a technical director does at a professional soccer club?
Let's talk about how it is with Lutz specifically. And I'll just tell you a very true story. My daughter-in-law, Melanie, has been living in our house. She's going to get her PhD at Wash U. She refers to Lutz as my girlfriend because she says the number of times that Lutz calls you per day means that you have to have some kind of crazy relationship going on. So it's a long-winded way of saying that we constantly are working on so many parts of how we build a team, but how we build a staff and how we help an academy get stronger and the coaches we select. So again, long-winded way of saying it's a lot of everything. Your hands are always on every part of the sporting. And with Lutz specifically, I'm always assisting him, in whatever he's asking for in any of those various calls that he makes during a day.
Have you adapted to his ways of working and you support that, or do you feel like you've got shared sort of philosophies when it comes to the beautiful game?
Both. I don't think I would have been brought here by Lutz unless we had a lot of those shared philosophies. But then for sure, I mentioned this earlier, we are different individuals and we have vastly different experiences. My experiences are much more, in the United States and domestic, and his are much more in Europe and so international. And the two of us, I think, have a good overall, when you talk about networks across the world, that's where there's a lot of strength in having us both work very closely together.
It is a taxing job, I don't work in it, but I watch you guys and you're in extremely early, you leave late. It's 24/7, whether you like it or not. What is it about the game that makes you love it, that you would give so much of your soul to the game?
I mean, it starts with that. like, I love the game. And since I was a young, boy, and I got introduced to professional soccer, and I was fortunate that I grew up in Tampa, Florida, with the heyday of the NASL, and these kind of rock star athletes from all over the world would show up every Saturday night in my hometown, and I could go watch them and then learn about them and where they came from. But it just built this idea that, I love this game. And then I started playing it in my neighborhood, and then I started playing it in club, and you just keep going. And so as an athlete, when you try to make it to the highest level that you can in a sport, and now you try to do it as a coach as well, it just becomes part of you. So I don't even think of it as a job. I think I'm incredibly lucky to do something that I love so deeply, and I don't know that I have any other way to look at it besides, why wouldn't I be doing this all the time? So really, I'm just a lucky person, and I do what I love, and I still love it, and I am finding I have so much more to give. I've been in it for a long time, but I'm not done yet, and that's what kind of drives me, knowing that I need to learn more, I need to be better in certain areas, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I love football.
You place a bit of a bet in life on the career that you choose, where you choose to work. You've stayed domestic. Does it bring you joy to see the game really kicking up a gear over the last few years? World Cup's coming, MLS players are getting better and better, the quality of the game is getting better, and you're sitting at the heart of one of the newest clubs. Yeah, I think it's incredible, and it's just part of the evolution of the sport in this country that, I don't think 26, when the World Cup comes here, will be, the highlight of it. It'll just start to evolve again. And again, I've just been fortunate, whether it was to be a young kid when the NASL was in its heyday, or now to be part of a MLS club, that the league is growing and getting better and attracting, now we have Messi, the GOAT, and we're still continuing to evolve. That's a really exciting project to be a part of. I don't think it's gonna stop anytime soon, because around the world, it's the best game. It's the one that people fall in love with, whether you're in a playground and kicking something around, towards a trash can, or you're watching it be played in a stadium on beautiful surfaces and, at the highest level. So I wanted to move into sections of what you do. We joke on every podcast, especially with the American players, what's the John Hackworth connection? Because there's always a connection somewhere along the way. They either know you, or you knew somebody and brought them into the club. Why are you always connected to these stories? How have you built such a wide network where you're in the know on all these? Well, first of all, I'm old. Okay, so I have many years to do that. But if you look at my background, I've been with the U.S. youth national teams, and then I've been with the Olympic team and the senior team, and then I went into the USL before coming here. So I was able to have a really good idea of young players to senior pros, and that knowledge has really helped in trying to build St. Louis City, and both, from our academy all the way to our first team. And that's probably why that you get that answer on podcast. I've also, and I would say this is much more directly, when Lutz and I are working together, I think he trusts me to know the domestic player pool. And so I take great responsibility in trying to do that to my best ability. And I generally pick players, based on their quality, but also their character. And when I have worked with somebody, or I know somebody, and in this world of soccer, it becomes a small little world, you tend to have a lot of the relationships that you can lean into and lean on, and you learn about people. So I wanted to focus on the character aspect. Lots of players have talent, and not everybody has talent plus a good character. How do you judge a character? What character traits go into making a good professional?
Ooh, that's an interesting question because I don't think it's defined that easy, Pete. I think that when you talk about character of a player and you talk about what their quality is as an athlete, you need to like drill down to what are you looking for? And specifically here, we have principles about how we want to play. And it means that we need players that come with like a blue collar work ethic, you know, and they also need to be a little bit selfless in their adaptation of their individual desires to the team. So you have to, it's a special combination, having a work ethic, but understanding their role within a group, and then having the qualities that you're looking for and need, especially at the different positions. So it's a lot of everything, but it does become much more specific. Like when you're looking at a 6 or you're looking at a outside back or you're looking at a 9, they all change the qualities that you might look for and the characteristics in them as a soccer player. But when we talk about character, there's something about representing this club where you have to have, you know, a certain characteristic of just of a person. That is for sure a mentality that you want somebody that is competitive. You want somebody that is willing to work. You want somebody that understands the responsibility of representing this club. Did I answer that, or is that like? I'm not sure I nailed it, but I'm trying to define like the differences maybe without giving all the answers, because they change based on what position we're looking for and what person. We don't want the same person necessarily. We want to build a group of people that can work really well together. Like I think if you look at our first team right now, regardless of where we sit in the standings, we have an unbelievable group of people in that building who will do whatever it takes to be successful, and that is going to bode really well for our future.
Do you have a background as an athlete? Do you kind of know what an ideal dressing room has, in the sense of like, this dressing room needs a bit of spike at the moment, or this needs somebody in the dressing room, there's too many young players, you need an arm around the shoulder? Are those all of the considerations that you have when you're looking at the squad names on the wall? Yeah,
I think you just nailed it. Like that's how I look at trying to build a culture and an environment where you get a lot of this collective team building that happens. Because if if it's not the right mix of people, it can go sideways really fast. But when you get the right mix of individuals and the right mix of character, you don't want everybody to be the same. You want there to be strengths in one corner of your locker room that offer something, and maybe the exact opposite on the other side. But at the same time, you're trying to build a group that is very, understanding of where they want to go and how they're going to do it. And I would say that that's been a strength of ours so far in the 3 years that we've had professional teams and players representing our club.
There's been quite a lot of churn in the dressing room from January onwards. It's an understatement. Have you seen players' characters evolve, or them find traits they didn't have? And like, does the leadership of a dressing room sort of change naturally, and people step up? And like, how has that looked? You've been on the shop floor watching that happen. How has that evolved?
Again, that's an excellent question. I don't know that I can answer it in a succinct way that makes sense. But if you look at the number of people that have left the locker room this year alone, we've lost some really important people, while we've acquired some really important people. And the rub is that you got to get that mix of who's currently in there as correct as possible. So, like when we lose certain individuals, whether that's a trade or, we send them out on loan, or they're just no longer, in our plans for the future, how do you bring in players that now make up for the loss of whether it's a leader or a certain characteristic you want. We spend a lot of time on that, and that is much more art than it is science in trying to select those individuals. I'm probably making it sound more complicated, but the example is you also have to have players that just understand that there's been, a vacated role, and can they step up now? I think we're in a position where we have players that have done an excellent job of that currently, and that gives us good hope that we can move forward and they can still grow and develop.
And shifting onto the more technical side and what you look for in a player profile, how do you go about identifying players? Is there like a layer of analysts that bring players for you to look at, or do you see players and then look at analysts, or is it just a mix of everything?
It's a little bit of both. So, our analysts do a fantastic job identifying players. At the same time, you don't just want it to be, it can't just be one or the other. It's got to be a combination of both. So when we are looking at any kind of profile, it changes based on the position, but then you also have to look at what that person is like and whether they can meet the demands that our principals are going to put on them. So it's really kind of an interesting process. And again, I'm probably not giving you a very great answer, but it's a mix of all of it, so that I know what I want in a player, but I'm not sure I can say that it's only this that I'm looking for, because I look for so many different little things. It starts with their technical ability, are they good soccer players? I like soccer players that are really good problem solvers, on the field. Can I see them and see that they have the technical qualities that all, professional athletes need, but then do they have the mental ability to get out of really tough situations? How do they react when things don't go their way? Are they smart, tactical players, and do they not put themselves in very many bad positions? And everyone's a little different, but that's where it starts. And then you start to talk about, okay, what are their athletic qualities like? What are their numbers like? You get all this data, so you could look at just the physical data. You could look at just the technical data, but it's a combination of all of them, Pete.
And this is a real layman's question, but like football lasts 90 minutes. You're scouring the world for players. Like, how do you watch the game? Like, how do you digest all of this information? Like, what does a day working with the analysts look like for someone like you?
Well, the analysts will present like a profile, and then they'll have video connected to that profile. So if I go look at just, you can only look at one player at a time, but then what I love to do is I love to go look at a whole game, because a whole game gives me so much more information than like a highlight package or a stats package. And so then I think of, okay, what's the position we're looking for? And what does our player profile per position look like? And then I start to dive down and say, okay, he checks off this box and this box and this box. He doesn't do this. Could we develop him into that? That's what I'm looking at when I look at game footage. And I think even more important than game footage, I really want to see a player live. Sometimes we don't have that luxury. And so between Lutz and I, Lutz will have a lot of knowledge about players, as an example, you just interviewed Cello. Cello is a guy that Lutz has seen in person many times. And if I'm picking Chris Durkin, it's because I've seen Chris Durkin live so many times. So I also think there's this, to really do it well, you need to do your job with the analysts. You need to, have them check off all the boxes and what they're looking for. And then you need to watch game film, and then hopefully you can see that player live to see so much more that you can't see on camera.
Is the watching the live bit where the experience comes in, that you've been on the pitch, you've been in the dressing room, and you can see the way that they interact with the bench, the way they interact with other players? Is it those like, you can't put your finger on what exactly it is, but you've been there so you know?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I wish I would have answered that in about 10 questions ago. Kyle Hiebert's a good example. So I didn't know that Kyle Hiebert existed on the planet, but I went to watch a Missouri State game, and I just watched this kid that I could not think about. Like, I saw, oh my goodness, this guy's a warrior. Oh my goodness, this guy's actually good with his right foot and his left foot. Oh my goodness, this guy could be, in a right back. He could be a left back. He could be a 6. He could be a center back. And so my example of going to watch a game where I see a player like a Kyle, and I start to see what their characteristics are like, but also what their quality is like, that's where I start to really get interested in a player. And it's a lot of everything that you want to look at. And for sure, I look very intentionally at what they do off the ball or what they do off the field as much as anything. And there's a lot of red flags that when I watch a game, I think, how does that player interact with his teammates? How does he react to a bad situation? How does he walk off the field at halftime? What happens at the end of the game when the referee blows his whistle? Like, I look at all of that as much as I watch in-game action.
There are a lot of young people that listen to the podcast. I met an 8 and a 9-year-old at the weekend that listen to the podcast, and they're soccer players. So they listen to a lot of people in St. Louis want to make it at the pro level. What would your advice be for players that think they might be getting scouted?
I would try to emphasize the fact that it's not only what you do when you play. If it's me, and I'm just being perfectly honest, I look at more at what they are like in the moments where they're not around a ball. Very specifically when the game is not going on, because that tells me much more about them and their approach to their, profession than what they actually do in game. You mentioned, all right, Pete, there's a lot of players that have talent. There's a reason not a lot of players make it to the highest level. And most of those have to do with how they approach their profession, how they, work outside of the lines of soccer. And that is really important. So my message would be careful about, how you do things even away from the field, because you never know who's watching, and taking notes on what that looks like.
Great advice. Let's talk about coaching, because you have been part of the shift in coaching in America at the sort of US men's national team level with a lot of the players that have come through. There's loads of talent all over the world at the moment that is American. Like, people are from the Premier League and La Liga and the Bundesliga are now raiding academies in North America and picking off players. What did you help change in America that's seen high quality of player coming through over the last decade?
I don't know that I was part of it, okay?
Part
and
of the movement.
I'm super proud of that. But we continue to need to do a lot of the same things. We need to make our sport so that it's not about if you can afford to play it. It's more that we need to bring more people into the sport. And we need to train younger players so that they learn how to play this sport and acquire all the skill sets, not just the technical skill sets. Some of it can be tactical skill sets, the mental skill sets. Some of it's the physical tools that you need to be a player. But can they do that earlier, and can they have an experience that, plants that seed that they love it so much, like what I tried to describe to you earlier, that they want to always go pursue that. I think in the country as a whole, I was part of this under 17 residency program where we moved away from, hey, if you play soccer, you're going to train 2 days a week, and you might go play games 2 to 3 times on Saturday or Sunday. And we moved to a position where we value the training and what they do in practice much more so than just the tournaments that you play as a youth player. I think all of that, and it's going to be a long-winded answer, but as I say, we've improved the training to competition model that is currently in this country. It still needs a lot of work, but in a simple way, we've developed more coaches and players by improving training and having meaningful matches. I think that's increasing the number of training sessions, decreasing the amount of matches, but making when you play that much more important for both the players, the coaches, and the officials and administrators, because all of that needs to, encompass the overall environment of everybody involved in the sport.
Are you feeling optimistic about the direction America is heading with soccer?
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard not to, because I think we continue to get better and better, but we also have to temper some of that expectation with the reality that everybody around the country or world is doing the same thing, and that we don't have some of the cultural ideas about how to become a great soccer player that other countries have around the world. I mean, it's traditionally around the world, it is a sport where, anybody can play and anybody has access to it, mostly because you can play pickup anywhere. You can find a version of a ball and you can set up a goal anywhere you want. We need a little bit more of that here, in the US, very candidly. We need access to the sport more than we currently have it. It can't be that, it's only whether your mom or dad can afford, to pay for club soccer. And I'm probably getting into the weeds here, but I would say overall access to our sport, we need to change it in this country so there is more access to anybody that wants to play it.
Do you feel that City Futures is part of the
Absolutely. I know that is exactly the reason why we have City Futures, to try to open up the game to more people and to more people that might not have the ability to access, a more traditional route of or pathway in this city or in this region.
And there's a great academy system that's being built over there. Have you enjoyed being able to work with the coaches, people like Dale Shilley and Lutz, to implement some of the learnings that you had in your previous jobs, like evolving what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of being a technical director, is that you need to have your hands on every level of the sport within the club. And so Dale's a perfect example. I've known Dale for a long time. I have a huge amount of respect for what he has done in the game, and specifically how he's done it in this St. Louis community. So he and I work really well together. We talk about ideas back and forth at all times. We're constantly trying to, educate the coaches, push them in the right ways, at the same time identifying better players. All of these things come into how we work together and how we're trying to build this thing as we move forward.
And you excited about some of the kids that are coming along? I mean, people often ask, like, who's the next one coming through the ranks?
Yeah, I mean, that's the easy, question and answer. Like, who's the next kid? The harder question is that sometimes you don't know who it is. You just got to provide a really good pathway for as many of them as you can. As an example, I mean, when I first got here, we only had 2 academy teams, and Lutz put me, on the sideline coaching one of those teams right away. And so I was really fortunate to work with a group of players, and some of those players have now matriculated into college, and those players aren't gone from us. They're just in a different phase of their own development. And I'm really excited about seeing if some of those players can continue to develop away from us when they're playing for college, and yet take advantage of being here, like in the windows where they can come and still train with our teams. Like Fritz Vollmer is an example of that.
Remember watching Fritz Creve Coeur.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, right? We were out at Creve Coeur, and he's at Northwestern now, and he's in his sophomore season. But he spent all summer with us too. So you get this combination of, and some of that's due to college rules and NCAA, but we're still trying to take advantage of opportunities to still provide, development, even when they have chosen to go to college, because everybody matriculates at a different rate. And we can't have this expectation that, okay, you get to the, end of our academy age group, and if you're good enough, you're good enough. And if you're not, you're not. That's not how it works. So keeping as many players in that pathway, or the possibility that they can come represent, our club in City Park, I think that's part of a really massive, an important part of how we view this process of bringing any player that represents us in the academy or we find in this area.
How do you inspire yourself on the coaching front? Like, it's a small industry, soccer. You all seem to know each other. Like, is there like an open ideas exchange? Like, do you go on courses? Like,
we're a bunch of thieves. We are absolutely a bunch of thieves, and we steal ideas from each other all the time. And the older you get, the more you start to recognize the bad ideas, and you start to recognize better ideas a little easier. But then it's not about just the ideas, it's about how do you apply that? How do you take it and use it in your training environment, or your dressing room, or your locker room, wherever it is that you're doing that job. We have, I have some non-negotiables that we talk about all the time with our players. And one of them is that we expect everybody to have a growth mindset. And I can't ask everybody to have a growth mindset if I don't have that exact same feeling. So, I mentioned that I'm old. That means I've been on soccer fields for a long time, but I still know I have more to learn. And so when I watch a soccer game, whether it's an EPL game or I, drive by Roosevelt High School and I literally am watching, hey, is there something out there? Is there somebody that I could pick something out? What's that kid doing? Oh, that's an interesting move. Just giving you the example that I have to have that same mentality. I have to be able to look at myself and say there's more that I need to learn to be better as a leader in this community.
So I understand the training sessions will be tailored to whatever you're working on, but are there like core principles that go into a hack training session? Are there things that you're like, you have to have this to keep players engaged?
Yeah, it starts with having fun. When we design, we talk about why we love this sport, and we all love it for one basic reason. Somehow we fell in love with a ball, right? And I think this is uncategorically the truth. You find somebody who loves this sport, they love a soccer ball. So whenever I design a training session, the first thing I think of is how can I get an objective across while creating as a game-like situation as I can? How can I make it competitive? Because that's what we also love. We love the challenge of competing. So it starts with the idea of how can I do something that meets an objective, a very specific objective on a training session, but also provide it in a way that the game is perhaps even a greater teacher than any coach could be.
And there are core principles at the club.
Sure.
Lutz and you and Dale, everybody talks about these core principles, but there's always the ability to put your own twist on those core principles. What's your twist on the model?
Probably that I want us to enjoy the parts that we love the most. For some players that would be with the ball, for some players that would be without the ball. For instance, I would give you the idea that if you're a center back, your responsibility is to, prevent the other team from scoring. If you're Roman Berkey, it's your job is to stop the ball from going in the goal. But even those guys love to play with the soccer ball too. And so if you can combine a little bit of both so that you provide the player or the position or the group of players the opportunity to, still find that balance, I think that's really important. Right now we're in a phase where we're becoming a better team with the ball, but that doesn't mean we don't want to press. That doesn't mean we don't, we're not repressing. That doesn't mean that we're not staying aggressive and trying to keep our intensity really high. there's so many parts to it that you have to layer in at the right times that you get this overall idea of hey, here's the city way of representing ourselves. And it does start with that mentality. It starts with a work ethic, but we also want the players to really enjoy it.
So you picked up the interim coach job. That's a transitional role to pick up, but then there was also a lot of change happening at the same time. As challenging go in your career, how has this one been so far?
It's been up there as one of the biggest challenges. I'll at the same time, it's been really rewarding because I mentioned at the start of this that our staff and the players have really tried as best they can to work together. And when you start working together and you get as many people, in the boat, and you get as many people rowing in the same direction, understanding their role within the context of a group, it becomes, I'm using the word fun, but it becomes, you get a little bit of that energy off of doing that together. And then when you start to have some success, you start to see it grow and grow. And so it's been a huge challenge in this time, that I've been in this interim role, but it's also been a really rewarding one.
Yeah. Added a lot of new players into the mix, like very different players than what was there previously. Has that been fun, working out how to integrate their personalities together and working out what the best structures are to get the maximum out of them?
Sure. And, I'm proud of what we've done. And it has been challenging. And the more quality that we've brought into the locker room, the more challenging it is for a coach to start making selections. When I first took over as interim, I didn't have a lot of challenging questions in that locker room because there wasn't the number of guys. We were calling up guys from City 2 to represent the first team. And all of a sudden, a couple weeks later in the summer transfer window, we have some really good players that are now at our disposal. And so that dynamic changed a lot recently. And it's been, I think I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's been the tough decisions that you really want to have happen as a coach. You want to have your job be as hard as possible when it comes to selecting, who's going to get the nod at a certain position, how are you going to structure the 11 together? How are you going to build that? The more players that are involved and competing for those opportunities, the better it is for all of us. And then it is a tough choice, but it's a good tough choice.
As the relationship shifted with the players, you having a prior relationship is obviously excellent, but going from sitting up here as a technical director, you're on every trip, so it's not like quite sitting up here, but then you're making the team selections. Does that change things a little bit?
Yeah, it does. It changes it, but I'm a huge believer that relationships on the field between the players are vital to how we perform. And the relationships off the field need to be just as strong. So I lean into that for sure. I've been in a great position since I've been here to start building a lot of those relationships, whether it's with Josh Yarrow or Kyle Hebert, who, we have played on City 2 and were really important players. And now we watch them progress to the first team and become really important players. Or if it's a Klaus who, got here in the middle of 22, and when I took over as interim, he was hurt and injured, and now he's back and playing. But I lean into those relationships, and I lean into it in a way where I have to be very consistent and honest with my approach to them. If we can build trust, whether we're making a decision one way or another, sometimes that's a good decision for a player, sometimes it's a negative one. For example, if I don't select a player for a starting lineup, I'm not their favorite guy. That's easy to see. But the real strength of a relationship is that it doesn't change how you really want to work with that individual. It doesn't change that you don't trust them. If you do those things consistently and are honest to that relationship, the next time you call upon them, you're going to get the best out of them.
Is there it feels like there's a bit of a movement in football amongst coaches in general to not talk about people that are not on the pitch as substitutes, and to sort of go down the route. I think Mikel Arteta calls them impactors. Like, is it like when you've got a squad full of, you know, talented players, is it like, is reframing like people's roles? Like, do you look at a role game to game, or do you look at it over 5?
It always changes from game to game. So that's where I would say it starts. But you want as many people, like I answer this question in relation to like soccer in this country. We want to have access to everybody. We want more people involved. In a locker room of professional players, you want everybody in that locker room to be feeling that they are important to the overall, you know, performance of the team, even if they're not selected, whether that be to be in the starting lineup or to make the team sheet. You know, I mean, we have guys in the locker room right now that don't get to play the game on Saturday because they've, you know, for whatever reason, they've been beaten out by their teammate. That's a really hard role to be in, but it's also, you know, you're a professional player. This is your job. My point is, we try to make sure that everyone feels valued and feels like they have a chance. And regardless of whether they make the starting team or they make the team sheet or they don't, they're still valued by our staff, you know, and that's where relationships are really tested. But when you build good ones, that's where you can get great strength out of the whole group. The guy who is pushing the starter is as important as the guy that gets to be in the starting lineup in City Park on a Saturday. You
lost the vice captain, beloved vice captain, who was a very vocal leader. You've got senior players still in the squad. You spoke about Klaus the other day being an emotional leader, and then we spoke to Klaus after, and he agreed with that. Have different leaders stepped up for you recently?
Yeah, you have to have that. You know, not having Tim in our locker room anymore, there's been a void for sure. But then somebody has to fill that void, and I give our guys a lot of credit for how that has evolved. Sometimes that's, you know, with you know, our staff pushing certain individuals into a leadership role, but sometimes it's just the natural way that a player understands they go from one role to the next because of whether a coach selects them or, in this case, you know, a teammate who was really valuable in that role is no longer here. Give our guys a ton of credit for dealing with all of that. Our players have had to deal with a lot, especially the guys that have been here, you know, for this season alone. It's a lot to deal with. And the fact that we're still here and we work as hard as we do and we work collectively as we do gives me, again, probably sound like a broken record, but it gives me great hope that we're going to be a really strong team in the future.
How important have the fans been? You've got a great relationship with the fans. You have since day one.
Well, sometimes I do.
Yeah. If they're not waving to you on a bike, different question.
They're not waving at me on a bike. That's just because nobody recognizes me around here. But the fans here, I want you to finish your question, but I'll start by saying the fans here are amazing. In particular, fans that, you know, they recognize that this is a really tough sport. They recognize how important it is for this city. And they're just so happy that we have a professional team at the highest level that they can come cheer on with all their heart and soul and put all of their passion into, you know, representing and helping us be the best version of ourselves. That is, at an essence, what, you know, our fans do for us. And it's a really privileged position to be representing our fans in this city.
There's only a few games left of the season. How are you thinking about like targets? Like what's the conversation that you're having with the boys in training every day?
As an example, we just had our leadership council meet this morning, and we collectively try to build the goals for how we want to perform and what some of our objectives are for the end of the season. And then there's some very, clear ideas of what we want to do. I don't know if I need to, list those here, but for example, we want to acquire X number of points. We want to have a goal differential of X. We want to have a certain number of wins. All of those things come into play so that we have to build those goals and then figure out how we attain them. Are they reachable? And if they're outside of our grasp right now, what can we do to put ourselves in a position to attain those? And again, that's a process of how you work, how you train, how you prepare, how you reflect, when things don't go your way. But I like the way that we're doing that, and we certainly have a good group of both staff and players that are working really diligently, economically, and hard to try to make sure that we do represent this club in all the right ways.
You've rebuilt the attack at City. You brought in a bit of German flair. We just had Marcel Hartel on the podcast. Lutz said he's the last great street footballer, which I thought was quite a compliment. And Marcel agreed. He spoke about the game in exactly the same way as you, about having fun. It looks like the attacking players are having fun. Simon's in the mix, toy shirt. You've got Klaus coming back into contention, Rasmus. Like, there's an abundance of indie. You've got an abundance of talent out there. And Edu looks like he's having a lot of fun out on the pitch. How much are you enjoying watching this attack interchange and banging the goals?
Yeah, it's a ton of fun to start with, and it's not without trying to get those relationships right on the field, and getting your principles in place and your ideas of how you expect them to perform. But at the same time, then it's giving them the freedom to go be creative and to use their own qualities as a player to pull off a play that I can't predict for them to do, or nobody could really. And that's where, in the essence of our sport, we call it the beautiful game. And it's beautiful because it's unpredictable. And when somebody is creative and imaginative and can do something that nobody told them to do in that moment, and it is successful, it's worth cheering, and when you can do that in front of, the City Park fans, and that building gets, as loud as it does, it gives you so much energy and a feeling that is so special. You can't even describe it.
Henry Kessler also joined the club recently. Baptism of fire for him. He had a really great first half at the weekend. How has he adapted to life in St. Louis, and what is he adding to the defense that feels fresh?
Well, I think Henry is a player that he wants to be a center back that is really good in his distribution, and he's quality playing out of the back. And it's a small tweak that we've made where we are trying to unbalance our opponent with our play, starting from Roman. And certainly Henry is a part of that, because he needs to give Roman the best possible option to, for that first pass. And then he needs to make a really good decision about how he moves the ball forward and how we, play through the lines and find our attacking players. And Henry is good at that. I know he can get better at that. And at the same time, there's no question that we have to get better defensively as a team. And certainly our defenders take that responsibility on first and foremost. So it's still a work in progress, but really happy that Kess is with us and is already added, I think, a lot of quality to our team. And at the same time, you look at him and you think he's a position and a player that can be here for a long time.
Scored a wonderful header in New England. Does he do that in training?
Haven't seen that outside. he does it some. He's a good target, especially for Alex Langer set piece special. He's a great target to have And at the same time, I wouldn't say that he puts himself in a position to score goals too much. Although when he wasn't, we first got here and he was like in a group of players that weren't always playing the games. He just couldn't play in the competition in Leagues Cup. But he was taking some shots from some pretty interesting areas. And so you already had the idea that maybe this guy is going to try to pull off, some amazing plays, even as a center back.
So going to get a few screamers might be coming our way.
He hit a couple screamers for sure.
Tell us what your targets are personally until the end of the season.
To try to finish this year with our club making not only progress, but progress that our fans can tangibly, support and see. We have 2 home games left, and in those 2 home games, we would like nothing more than to send our fans who support us so great home with, smiles on their faces and memories that they can hopefully share for a long time to come. If we do that and we show that we are as good a team as we think we are, that's what we really have to do right now. We've showed improvement, but we have to make sure that we get those results that, everybody so desires and we think we deserve.
No, I don't want to look too far ahead, but are you optimistic about the squad of players that we've got heading into this season?
Yeah, look, we are in the position now where we have to look at that, Lutz and I spend a lot of time on trying to make decisions that look forward and say, this is where we need to get to. And I think we really have a good foundation of who those players are and how we're going to get there. It never ends. It's always changing. It changes on a training session when somebody goes down with an injury, or it changes when, as a club, we make a decision to make a change. But for right now, I think we're sitting in a good position, and we're all feeling that we're making the progress. Again, I think we need to show a little bit of that.
Fantastic. John, we have a little tradition at the end of the podcast where the last word goes to you and to say whatever you want to the fans.
Well, first of all, I want to apologize to the fan that I did not get to, and I promised I would go sign an autograph to. So I think this might come out after the fact, but I've invited that fan and her family to come to training. We're going to roll out the red carpet and make sure that we make up for my mistake, which was literally not going over and signing an autograph. And I had promised to do that in the previous game. But I would say that it is because, and I talk about this all the time, this is a soccer city where it's so unique with the history of our city and the fact that you have now whole families that love this sport and are excited about, our club, and specifically about watching our club play in City Park, that we need to take on that responsibility and be accountable for it. And so they're fantastic. We owe them and we owe them to give our best, performance possible as we close out the year. And that means that the best thing we could do is make them smile by being really good in our performance and hopefully getting really good results.
That's a great message, John. Thank you so much for joining us for the podcast and giving your time during a busy period. Hopefully you can come on again next year. And if you're listening to the City fans, you know the job. You've got to give a 5-star review. Tell John how much you enjoyed listening to him, just to give him that extra bit of encouragement. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Pete.
Ciao for now, everybody.